Alright, so first video in a very long time. I have a lot of stuff to go over. I'm gonna kind of just jump in here because there's some stuff in the beginning. I'm not entirely positive of what I have shown before, so at the moment I have this black screen that just kind of shows the splash that I haven't added in yet. And then the start screen, I'm pretty sure I had this in before in my last videos. I haven't taken the time to go through them. Rotating elemental things, they will all be animated. The eye slowly looks around randomly at all of them while they're going through, and then hitting the new game button stops them and the eye freaks out. Shoots out this light, and then you go into some new stuff that I know is for sure new. Um, so the idea here is that there are the 6 kingdoms. Each kingdom has its own story, kind of starting story. They all basically go through the same thing, um, but each one of the starting kingdoms affects your stats, your starting stats. So the Earth, once you click on one of them, all of the other ones get discolored. Goes a little bit see-through. All of this obviously is playthrough stuff. It's just kind of working on the general function of stuff. So as you can see here, all your start at 1. Anything that's getting increased is shown in green. So the Earth Kingdom has strong will, basically, so they have lots of vigor and endurance. Um, General story stuff over here, and kind of explain some of the stuff about the Earth Kingdom and how the story is happening. Each of the different kingdoms have different stats. So if you're planning on playing a wizardy character, mage, it'd be probably best to start in the air, but you can do whatever you wish. So clicking on one of them gives change the information, and then clicking it again selects that kingdom to be your starting class. Double checks to make sure that you actually want to do that. If not, you can go back and select any of the others. Otherwise, you go to class selection. So again, placeholder stuff, and I have I have this very basic stuff here. So warriors go slashy slash, mages make magic booms, and rogues go stabby stabs. In this description area here, that is clearly a joke at the moment, it's going to detail some of the play style of rogues, or mages or warriors. So it kind of explains how the class plays, what special things they get, and also goes into the specializations that each of those classes have. So gives kind of just a vague overview of how they would play and what you'd be able to select doing any of those things. Each of the classes also gets to start with specific gear. So mages are kind of magey. They start with a wand and they have some silken light armor. Warriors get sword shield, sword and board, and then some heavy armor, and rogues get medium with a dagger and a parrying shield. So all of this equipment actually affects your starting gear, so it is all set in right now that you actually start with this stuff, and all of your stats are affected by whatever you choose. Once you go to select one of the classes, you can either go back to the kingdom selection and change that, go back to this class selection, or finalize the character. Once you go in here, you see a very familiar screen. I'm not super positive. It looked like the last video I hadn't actually put in the background stuff. So I did put in lots of background and kind of gave a vague, super not finished, kind of just a path structure. So I have a bunch of these tiles basically for the backgrounds that just have different path layouts. So some like this, lots of T sections and whatnot, so on and so forth. But just is yeah, just have the paths in. I'm gonna be adding a bunch of different things. You can see the little bush up here is one of the items or one of the environment pieces I'm gonna be adding, and some other stuff too, some trees and whatever. This is the life kingdom, so it's gonna be plants and trees and bushes and rocks and stuff like that. So, still working on art. I haven't really put in a lot of that stuff because I'm not done with any of the art really. But going into the inventory, not a whole lot has changed with most of this stuff, but you can see that all of these things are actually in here. So I chose a warrior, so I have the sword and board. Both of those are in. This thing is just a testing weapon that I've had in. But you start with whatever equipment you get, going into your equipment that you actually have, and that's based off of your starting as well. I haven't changed anything about the magic starting stuff yet, so I do have to work that. Any of these blue ones are actually spells that I've been working on to get the functionality working, which I can try and go into in this video. We'll see if I was seeing some bugs with them just testing just before making this, so some of them might not be working. But I've started working on all of the buff spells, so anything that actually buffs your character is done, at least for the vast majority of the spells. Fairly certain nothing has changed here. In the crafting screen, going in and crafting something, there's now this kind of pop-up screen to show your spoils or kind of whatever you've made. So obviously the red square here would be a thumbnail of the item. You have to click accept to actually get it. And then the same thing happens with deconstruction. So destroying the item, you see how many you gained of the pieces, and of course, I think I've said this in the previous videos, these are not the actual items you would get from destroying an axe, but it shows you how many you gained and how many you have now that you have destroyed that item. So not a whole lot changed there. Let's see, that would be the other big thing. So I've been working pretty mostly on some systems work, kind of behind the scenes stuff that I probably wouldn't even really be able to show off. But the armor system and damage calculations is a big thing that I've been working on. So all the armor, your values gets totaled up. It'll probably be changed eventually to be a percent reduction kind of thing instead of just some arbitrary number that doesn't quite make a lot of sense. But I'll see. I think that would probably be the best way to do it going forward, because otherwise these 62 physical armor doesn't really mean anything. But so all of the armors have specific elemental armor, so 10 death armor, 1 earth armor, 17 physical armor. At the moment, they all just have the same stats. Another thing that doesn't quite show here is stat scaling. Depending, I've put in all of the scaling for all of the weapons, armor, and spells. So depending on what type of thing it is, a weapon, strength or dexterity or intelligence or whatever, the scaling values for those specific weapons. There are 6 levels of scaling, overall levels. So from A scaling down to E, or I'm sorry, from S scaling down to E scaling. And then within each of those letter scalings is high, low, or high, medium, and low value. So say S scaling is 20% scaling, and then 20 to 30% scaling. So high S would be 30, low S would be 20, and a medium S would be 25. So depending on the type of scaling, if it's a medium, low, or high, it changes the color of this. This A is black, so that means it's a medium A scaling value. Kind of confusing. The basic idea I'm trying to go with for this is that you can very quickly at a glance see what kind of scaling you're going to be getting. So if you're trying to make a build sort of thing, you have a very quick, easy idea of the gist of what you're going to be able to do with this armor or weapon or spell, depending on what stats you have or what stats you need to get to use that thing effectively. All of these values are completely arbitrary at the moment, and I need to change especially the scaling because they are very broken at the moment. But you can, at the moment, if I increase my endurance and resistance up past the required, which is 20 for these armor pieces, it will increase all of these values. So if I increase that one, it's 40, I think that one went up. I probably should be looking at these. Actually, they're not going up. Oh, there we go. So the death went from like 40 to 120. and the earth went from 4 to 20. So each armor elemental armor value is tied to specific stats. I don't have them off the top of my head, but like for instance, strength is probably strength and dex would be how you get your fire resistance scaling. So if a armor has scaling on either of those things, it increases the base value of the fire armor value based on how much extra scaling you have over the required stats. Very confusing to explain. Makes, I think, a lot more sense when you look at it or when you're playing. So to try and rephrase that, so these leggings have 20 and 20 for resistance and endurance required. So they have these base stats, and you can use it and get the base stats at any point. Once you get up to 21 res or endurance, then you'll start gaining scaling based on which one you have. So if I had 21 resistance, I would start gaining the A value scaling off of that excess amount of stats. So at 21 resistance, I might now have, I think death is tied to resistance, so now it might have 11 death armor if I have 21 resistance. If I get up to 25, it might go up to like 15 or whatever. Anyway, that's the idea. So definitely, that's probably the most visible things that have changed outside of some system stuff. Like I said, there are lots of spell things that I've been working on. We'll see if some of this stuff is working. It was bugged before. And you can see this. So this small, tiny red box here is the melee for this specific weapon that I have equipped. If I changed, so I have this broadsword on. If I change to Identity Crisis, there's a much larger square. So the idea behind that is that there are different sweet spots for weapons and different ranges. So like daggers, and I need to change a lot of the values for these things, but like daggers will be really close and they'll have a very narrow hitbox, versus like a sword is going to have a slightly larger, slightly wider hitbox and a little bit longer. And then like a two-handed axe is going to have a really long range and a really long or wide hitbox. And then things like flails or halberds have kind of hitboxes that are only really far out. I might have already talked about this, so I apologize in advance if I'm repeating information. I'm also trying to get through I think I've missed making videos for like 2 months, so I'm trying to squeeze a whole bunch of information in here and make it really quick at the same time. So the other big thing that I have been working on is spells. I added in spell icons for all of the spells. Every single spell has an icon now. Some of them are quite poopy looking. This one is not great. But at the moment, any buffs, which is what I've been working on, buffs go into this little kind of buff bar above here. So you can see how long you're going to have the effect of that buff before it's going to go away. And then you also have a cooldown. So this little clock animation kind of thing, cooldown animation works for the cooldown of the spell, and then it also tells you the buff down here. I can't remember off the top of my head what this one does. Oh, I can probably read it actually. Oh, so this one just steals some AC from enemies, so when you hit them, you gain a little bit of AC each time you hit them. Oh, this one looks like it's buffed, or it's bugged actually. Yeah, it's giving me an error. Okay, so this one gives extra resistances, so let's see if it gives. There we go. So it went from 20 to 23, 20 to 22, and some other things changed. So this one just, while this is active, it gives you some extra bonuses. So once this buff goes away, we will be able to see that these numbers change back to what they were. Let that tick down for a second. There are a vast number of different spells. Most of them are tied to the mage class, and I picked warrior, so it's not quite as easy to show, but you can see here the buff ended. That's went back to whatever they were, except for apparently the death one, which looks like it's not correct anymore. Like I said, lots of bugs with the spells at the moment. But let's see which other ones are pretty cool here. Rebirth. Oh no, that's okay. Let's see here. Here's Sword Echo Boge. Flame Cloak. I think that one's fun. Oh yeah, this one looks like it's a little broken too. So this one is supposed to be making the little green square that's kind of trailing my character. It's supposed to be making flames randomly behind you, and then those flames kind of move around erratically. It looks like I have a lot of bugs that I have to go. So gist is there are, I think, 90-ish spells that I got through in terms of buffs that were previously all working. I did, after finishing all of the buffs, I did start the armor changes, because at the beginning I only had physical kind of armor, so I was only checking one type when doing damage. And I did change a few things, so I think that might have messed with some of the internal logic of the buff type stuff. But so there's tons of spells, there's tons of information that I've added in terms of values for scaling, armor values, stuff like that. Got the character selecting kind of stuff in the beginning done, and I'm probably forgetting all kinds of stuff. Like I said, it's been like 2 months of not having videos being made regularly, so I moved, been going through a lot of stuff trying to get things in order, so I've been kind of sporadically working. Now that I have been more regularly working the last couple weeks, I need to get back in the habit of making videos. Super long-winded, terrible video. Usually I remake these multiple times. I'm not even going to bother with this one because it would take me hours and hours to actually get this to a point where I like it, even remotely. So I will say, as a final word here, something I would really love to get working and get used to and comfortable doing is making kind of spliced videos. So I had tried it sometime between this last video and the one I'm making right now, of kind of splicing together things so that I can make really straight to the point, quick videos where I can just quickly make a little, kind of like most YouTube videos where you have that little jump while they're speaking. So I can specifically talk about one thing, splice it together with the other pieces, and then also have little breaks, have pieces of probably really basic graphics, just some text coming up on the screen to talk about what I'm doing. And I'd also really like to get a format going, so talk about new features, talk about I don't know, new things that are happening in terms of going forward with the game process, and talking about bugs, and then the next week, and so on and so forth. So that probably won't be happening for a couple videos going forward. I'm still trying to get into a habit with my new schedule kind of thing. And yeah, I think I have rambled far too long. I'm sure this video is extremely long. Actually, not that long. I'm kind of surprised. Anyway, I will get back to it. Try and make a more concise, a little bit better video next time, and we'll go from there. All right.